That seat. Now we're back in the state's case in chief.
Just have one moment, Your Honor.
Put your computer down. And raise your right hand. Solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury your testimony in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Put yourself close to the microphone.
Thank you.
And you've tested your computer.
I did, yes, thank you. Excuse me. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Would you please state your name for the record and spell your last name for the court report?
Yeah, Jeremy James Bauer, B-A-U-E-R.
And what's your current occupation and who do you work for?
I'm a forensic injury biomechanist, and I have my own company called Bauer Forensics, LLC,
And where is Bauer Forensics?
Seattle, Washington.
And have you prepared a PowerPoint slides to help you with demonstrations to assist your testimony be presented to the jury?
Yes.
Your Honor, if I may let him present his PowerPoint.
Thank you.
And do you have a copy of your report that you made in this case and your CV?
I do.
You can use it if we need to throughout this. But what is Bauer Forensics?
Yeah, a consulting company in forensic injury biomechanics. So I essentially get retained in matters of either litigation or sometimes commercial cases, reconstructing any incidents that have to deal with injuries. So car crashes, slip, trip, and falls, a lot of shooting incident reconstructions, and just other miscellaneous bad things that happen to people, construction site accidents, et cetera.
Okay. And Dr. Bauer, can you give us your educational background?
Yeah, so I went to, I got a Bachelor of Science degree in physical education with an emphasis in biomechanics from Boise State University in 1997. And biomechanics is essentially the study of anatomy and physiology and physics and engineering. So it's applying those mechanical principles of mechanical engineering and physics to the human body. Then I went to Oregon State University, where I earned a master's degree in human performance. That was with a biomechanics emphasis, and that minor in zoology is essentially a minor in more anatomy and physiology. So learning about muscles, bones, the nervous system, vision. And then I stayed on at Oregon State University and completed a PhD as well in the same area, human performance, biomechanics emphasis with a minor in zoology, and graduated in 2006.
And do you have any other academic coursework that's related to your field in biomechanics?
Yeah, so there was quite a lot of academic coursework through the 9 years that's there, and it's very heavily based in anatomy and physiology, mechanical engineering. That mechanical engineering background really discussed a lot about dynamics and statics. So dynamics including projectiles, which includes bullets, includes rockets. So a very diverse education in mechanics and engineering, alongside a very diverse education in the human body and how the human body works.
And Doctor, I think you provided me your CV. It's about, I don't know, 14 12 pages long. Does that reflect your education, professional affiliations, and a lot of information about you?
Yes.
Well, we'll go through a little bit about this because we can't read it all, okay? Maybe what's related to this incident that's here, all right?
Okay.
All right. So what is the study of biomechanics?
Yeah, it's essentially studying how the body works, and more specific to the field that I work in now, it's the forces and motions that essentially cause injury. And so it's being able to apply those principles of engineering and physics to the human body. So in a car crash case, for instance, it's whether or not the forces from a crash could cause an injury that's being claimed, a spinal cord injury. In a shooting incident, it's looking specifically at what angles the body was oriented in when a bullet struck the body. So being able to look and know about the specific anatomy to know where the bullet passed through to determine how that body was positioned when it was struck.
Have you been published before?
Yes.
And can you tell us about that?
Yes, I published one paper with some co-authors and co-workers. I used to work for another firm for 17 years called Hayes and Associates, and we published a paper specifically looking at how we could determine the timing of gunshots fired in a specific case, an officer-involved case shooting at a moving vehicle. I've also given lectures and talks on shooting incident reconstruction, anywhere from technology associations who are interested in the type of technology that gets used to do shooting incident reconstructions, but also to law schools and right down to middle school level, teaching science to kids and really trying to, show an application of science and really fascinating science to the kids.
Do you have any accreditation certifications?
I do. So I am a remote pilot for small unmanned aircraft systems. Basically, I'm licensed to be able to fly a drone use that for a lot of scene documentation purposes. I'm a certified forensic photographer. I am an accredited accident reconstruction through an organization called ACTAR. I'm also certified to measure the friction and slipperiness of surfaces for walkway safety purposes. And then I've completed the Faro Focus 3D Scanner Certification Program, which is designed to teach one how to use laser scanners to accurately document the geometry of a scene.
And in fact, in this case, there is a Faro scan that you used in this matter. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. Doctor, have you been court qualified in cases involving shooting instances?
Yes.
Okay, and can you tell me which courts that you've been qualified to testify in that subject matter?
Yeah, I've got them listed up here. So these are the courts where I've testified in trials involving shooting incidents. And the first one I did, I believe, was in Delaware, but also in Oregon, here in Ohio, in Illinois, California, and Washington.
Okay. And actually here in Franklin County. So.
Yes.
Okay. Doctor, can you, do you have some professional affiliations as well?
I do.
And can you tell us about a few of those?
Yes, I'm a member of ACTAR, which is the Accreditation Commission for Traffic Accident Reconstruction. I'm a member of the IAI, which is the International Association for Identification, which is what my forensic photography certification is through. A member of the Society of Automotive Engineers, a member of the American Society of Testing Materials, the ASTM, may sound familiar. Also a member of LEVA, which is the Law Enforcement Video Association, the International Society of Biomechanics, and that's what I'm recalling at the moment.
Okay, and how many years have you been in this business?
This is starting my 27th year in this field.
Doctor, now you've, when you do testify in these type of areas, do you testify in civil and criminal cases?
Yes.
Okay, and does it matter whether it's a criminal case or a civil case as to how you conduct your analysis?
No.
How many cases do you believe that you've testified in regarding these type of matters? Where you're,
Shooting type of matters or?
no, just overall in biomechanics?
Oh yeah, I've testified in trial a little over 30 times in general, and in depositions well over 100 times.
Yeah, so sometimes cases don't go all the way through to the end?
Most of the time they do not.
Right. So, what are some of the tools that you use and to use in the study of biomechanics and human motion?
Primarily cameras. We use cameras very often nowadays. If you walked into a biomechanics lab, it would look like a motion capture lab that you saw on a Marvel behind-the-scenes feature, because it's the same thing. We're using markers on limbs in order to measure human motion, but just much more precise than is used for animations or movies. Because in biomechanics, we want to know velocities. We want to know how fast the angles are changing, the positions of the hands, versus just having it cosmetically look good in film. In addition to recording the movement, it's also important to record the forces that are associated with that movement. So oftentimes we'll use force plates that are mounted in the ground, which are very fancy, very expensive scales that are in the ground. And so if you can measure the motion of a person and measure the forces that are acting on the ground and acting on their limbs, you can then calculate what the forces are in other parts of the body.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to ask the court to permit Dr. Bauer to testify in his field of expertise of biomechanics and human motion.
He'll be able to render opinions.
Render opinions. Thank you, Your Honor. Were you retained by the state to render an opinion in this case?
Yes.
And you're a private business, is that right?
Correct.
So you do charge for your time.
I do.
Would you tell us what your hourly rates are?
Yeah, hourly rates are $400 an hour when I'm doing work, and then $600 an hour during testimony.
Now, what was it that was requested of you in this case?
Yeah, so I was asked to, I was made aware of the dispute, essentially, and was basically asked to review the evidence in this case, and first and foremost, to determine how Casey was positioned at the time he was shot. So just from a biomechanics shooting incident reconstruction standpoint, to determine the relationship between where was the gun with respect to how was Casey standing when he was shot. The second part of this then is, after doing that scientific reconstruction based on the evidence that was gathered in this case, I was asked to determine whether or not that reconstructed position of Casey after having been shot is consistent with the statements that were made by Mr. Meade describing his recollection of Casey's actions immediately before the shooting.
And were you able to reach conclusions after your entire analysis and everything that we're going to go through here, reach conclusions to a reasonable degree of scientific and biomechanical certainty in this case?
Yes.
And what were those conclusions?
Yeah, those conclusions were, first, that we know there were 6 shots that were fired, and all 6 of those shots struck Casey's body. The second is that Casey was standing in the house, so at the level of the kitchen floor, when he was struck by each of those 6 bullets that were fired by Mr. Meade. And then the third conclusion was that there's no configuration in which Casey can be both standing in the house on that threshold and aiming a gun at Mr. Meade in the manner that, in a manner described and demonstrated by Mr. Meade, that conforms with that physical evidence that was gathered at the scene.
Okay, so taking the question that was asked of you, review and getting to the conclusions that you arrived at, were you provided case materials in this matter to review?
Yes.
And can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the case materials that I was provided included body-worn camera footage of officers who responded after the incident. There were photographs that were taken at the scene, and there was eventually a laser scan of the scene conducted with a Faro, that's a company named Faro laser scanner.
And what type of objective evidence did you utilize? Can you explain this a little bit?
Yeah, I'll show you. Sorry, I jumped ahead a little bit. Yeah, so the types of evidence that we use in doing any type of reconstruction, whether it's car crashes, a slip and fall, and very important shooting incident reconstruction is objective evidence, which is comprised of photographs, so video, a laser scanner, something that memorializes the evidence at the scene and documents the evidence at the scene or in the body, and that is not based on a recollection, let's say, or someone's description. So it's something that we can look at a photo and say, ah, I see. So in this particular case, I was provided with some body-worn camera footage, a little bit hard to see with the lights on in here, but
Want to turn down the light?
yes, please. But a couple important things to note, and always in any injury case or a fatality type of case, is a person's position of rest. So in this instance here, we have officers responding after the shooting incident, and we can see Casey's legs on the ground in the kitchen. So we know where the approximate area that he came to rest, and that's important to know. Then there were photographs at the scene that were taken that document specific evidence at the scene. And I've isolated 2 photographs here intentionally because there are really 3 important pieces when doing a shooting incident reconstruction. And the first is we want to know where was the gun, the approximate location of the gun when the shots were fired. We want to know where was the person that was shot standing when the shots were fired. And then we want to know in the environment itself, if there are any bullet impact points in the environment that can help constrain where the shooter was with respect to where the person who was shot was located. So this photograph that's on the left shows us the evidence documented at the scene of 6 bullet casings fired from Mr. Meade's firearm.
What's the significance about the location of those bullet casings?
Yeah, that's significant because in semi-automatic handguns and in the rifle used by Mr. Meade, we know that with each shot that's fired, a bullet casing will eject to the right. So we know it ejects to the right. Some will have some forward ejection pattern, some will eject backward as well, but almost universally to the right-hand side. The fact that they're clustered against the fence here could mean that they hit the fence and dropped straight down. But really what it tells us is that we know that Mr. Meade, or the position of the gun when it was fired, had to be to the left of where we're seeing these bullet casings. And that makes sense just from what we know already, is that the bullet has to go through this open gate into the screen. And then the photograph on the right, oh, sorry.
Where the bullet casings are shows that the bullets were ejected to the right.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes. So it makes sense from what we know about the scene already that those bullet casings would be next to the fence there to the right if the gun then is to the left and in line with the screen door through that open gate. Then on the right-hand side here, we have this screen door. We've got glass that's on the porch or the patio. And then we have some evidence of holes in this screen door. So this tells us that bullets that were fired from that gun that were somewhere outside of the gate, but in line with the screen door, a bullet fired from that gun passed through this screen door before it struck Casey's body. So now we have So now we have a way with just the objective evidence, not with anyone's recollection of what happened, to be able to place the approximate position of the gun, a surrogate for Casey in this environment, and to do that reconstruction work.
So you're just trying to grab all the objective evidence that will allow you to start the analysis.
Correct.
And what's the other piece of?
Yeah, so I always look at, we always look at a scene diagram. Usually this is generated by the investigating law enforcement agency to diagram the approximate positions of the evidence at the scene. And here we do see that there was, they identified the bullet casings, they identified this open gate and the screen door location. But then this next piece here, and these are sometimes hard to look at. This is a screen capture showing the Faro laser scan data of the scene. So we're kind of
Tell the ladies a little bit about the Faro.
Yeah. Yeah, so Faro laser scanner is like a really expensive version of a Home Depot laser rangefinder. So, you know, those laser finders where you can set it down, press a button, and get a distance to the wall. This is the extreme version of that, where it has a little head here that spins around. There's a mirror that's spinning. A laser hits the mirror, bounces off to a wall, comes back. And as that mirror is spinning, basically the laser is hitting every point around it. So we're basically getting millions of measurements called a point cloud, which gives us these, really incredible way to document the geometry of the scene and take it back to the office to make measurements after the fact. So it's a way to preserve evidence and a way to perform analyses where you don't have to be here to do it.
And this was from the FBI Faro scan that you received, and you took it from that.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So what's next that you were obtaining?
Yeah, so the next piece of this is so this is all the scene evidence that's been documented. So here we've looked at all the evidence, the bullet casing locations, the evidence of bullet impacts in the screen door. We know Casey's approximate position of rest. But now we want to get, in this shooting reconstruction, there's another piece of this that's really important to consider, and that's the objective evidence of the wounds. So the actual wounds that were sustained and documented on and in Casey's body.
Okay. And how did you obtain those measurements?
So those were all provided in the coroner's report or the autopsy report.
So they were actual measurements from her.
Yes.
Okay. And in your experience in doing this, are those measurements usually here at?
I'm not there to make the measurements, but certainly in the many autopsy reports that I receive and review in shooting incident cases, there's a very standard protocol for essentially documenting wounds, and it starts with measuring the location of that wound with respect to an anatomical landmark. So oftentimes it's a distance from the top of the head down, and then a distance from left to right of the middle of the body. Sometimes they'll describe the wound for a numerical number of inches from the bottom of the heel to the body. So, but I always rely on the autopsy report for specific numerical distances to those wounds in order to do my analysis.
And do you also use a visual?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Okay, you continue on.
Yeah, so I'm going to go through just word of warning, and always hate to do this, but we have to look at anatomy and we have to look at wound photographs. So we're going to start with, and there's no particular order to these wounds, other than this is the way they were labeled by the medical examiner. So the first thing that I look at is, first of all, just see if the wound descriptions and their approximate locations correspond to the numbers and the description in the autopsy report. So this first slide here, even though the bullet wound we see on the left is labeled A, that's actually the exit wound on the front of Casey's left side of his chest, whereas the entry wound is over here at D. And so, you know, when oops, let me go back up, sorry. And one of the first things that I see here is that if you look at D, that's roughly just a little bit to the left of the center of his back. If we look at where A is located, it's not quite in the middle, but it's further over to his left. So the one thing that tells us right away is that we have a bullet path that goes from his right to his left. And it also seems to be approximately about the same height. So it's not, there's no significant forward or backward angle to this. So that's what I look at initially when I'm looking at each of these shots.
And you were also to look at the coroner's report too, referring to that.
Absolutely, yes. So then we go to the next shot that was documented. And again, we have an entry wound, which is E on the right. Again, that's fairly close to the center of the back. And then we have an exit wound that's far over on the left chest. And again here, that exit wound at B is not in the middle. It's far to the left. So again, we get another idea that we have a bullet that's proceeding from his right to his left. Similarly, we have another entry wound on his back, and this one is to just in the back underneath his left side, and it comes out again on the left side under his armpit. And so we can tell again from this, we have a right to left bullet path, but it's fairly, if he was standing up, it's fairly flat trajectory, so we don't see any significant up to down angle when we're looking at this wound. Now we go down to, there are 3 bullet wounds on his lower torso. This wound is a graze wound, so it's not a wound that entered and then exited. And we can see generally with a graze wound, the fact that there's a curve to it implies that if you were to bend forward, right, if you were to bend this forward, it would straighten out. So this gives us some idea that when this bullet struck him, he was bent forward. Then we have an entry point to the right side of his lower back. And you'll see this is quite different than the previous wounds we looked at because we have evidence that this bullet lodged in his upper chest on his left side. So we go from his right lower back to his upper chest on the left side. So unlike the other shots that seem to be roughly about the same height on his body, this one starts low and goes high, and it lodges. So we know, I know, in this type of reconstruction that in order to have produced the bullet path that goes from his low back to his upper chest, he had to have been bent forward at the time that this was inflicted. And then the final wound is to his kind of right upper buttock. And again, we use x-rays here to look at the location of where a bullet lodged, and it lodged in his pelvis in the abdomen area there. And this one is a fairly flat, level bullet path, but all of these bullet paths have a direction that goes from his right to his left, from bottom to top.
How do you use this evidence that you've shown to the jury in your analysis, that your shooting reconstruction trajectory analysis?
Yeah, I will show that in detail in a few slides, but the way to use this is essentially we connect the wounds together. So you take an exit wound, use a digital rod, so you'd use a cylinder to connect this exit wound to the entry wound in order to be able to visualize the bullet paths through the body. The old days, they'd use real rods and stick them into styrofoam dummies to try to just visualize the bullet paths through the body. These days, we can use 3D digital technology to do that. Because what that then does is allows us to take those rods and extend them out and actually manipulate and move the figure to the point where those rods line up with the area where we know the gun was located.
So in the old days, you'd have like a 3-foot rod, you'd stick it through, and then you'd have to try to figure out where it goes.
Yes.
Okay, what's next?
Yeah, so everything that we've just seen comprises the evidence that's required to determine how Casey was positioned when he was shot, essentially. So with respect to the environment, because we have the evidence of the holes in the, oops, I don't know, we timed out here.
Is that from our end?
I don't know. Let's see. I'll try and unplug and replug. That's always the, let's see. Hey, there we go. Thank you. So everything that we have looked at so far comprises the evidence that's required to actually answer the question of, in the environment, how was Casey positioned when he was shot? So then the next piece of it, and is, the piece of the ultimate question here is the description of the incident. So then we'd look at Mr. Meade's recollection or description of the incident to essentially determine whether or not that description is consistent with the shooting incident reconstruction based on that objective evidence.
And so you had two different statements from Mr. Meade, is that right?
Yes.
They had the type statement.
Yes.
And then you had a hearing testimony statement.
Correct. Yeah, so during a hearing, well, first we'll go to the statement. Mr. Meade had produced a statement, and these are quotes from the statement that said, "He turned and looked in my direction while lifting his right arm back toward me, raising and leveling the barrel of the gun in my direction." Then there was testimony at a hearing where Mr. Meade testified he, Casey, was in the threshold. He had his back to me, and then he made a turn like this, bringing the gun up and pointing it back to me. So, and there was a demonstration during that hearing, which we see kind of a before turning and after turning and raising the gun, demonstrated by Mr. Meade.
Now what do you do?
Yeah, so now, again, the first thing to do is actually determine and show how Casey was positioned when he was shot with respect to the location of the gun. So to do that, I look at, again, the environment. So this is a side view of the laser scan data, and I just wanted to emphasize the kind of the elevation change differences between the kitchen floor and the ground. So we have a sidewalk there that's on the left. Then there's a 10.8-inch step up onto this porch or patio. It slopes up about 3.4 degrees until we get to the doorway. And then it's an 8.2-inch step up to the level of the kitchen floor.
And so you're using this to try to determine how to get into the house in the different levels.
Yes, just to understand what it takes to get from the ground and get into the house at the kitchen floor level. So then the next step, once I've got that 3D geometry of the scene with the Faro scans, is to now map out in three-dimensional software those bullet wounds. So the first thing I do is take a sphere and place it at the numerical location where the bullets were described, or the wounds were described in the autopsy report. So this is a 3D surrogate or a dummy, essentially a stand-in for Casey's body. So it's assigned a height of 6 feet 2 inches. And just like the coroner described in their report, I will place a sphere at the top of the head, and I will move it. For example, the first bullet 1 entry that we see up there, that was described as being 17 inches below the level of the head. So in this software, I can drag it down 17 inches and place it where it was described in the autopsy report, and also where we see it in the photographs.
So you're putting it where, when we first saw the autopsy photos, you're placing those bullet hole wounds in your surrogate up here, is that right?
Exactly.
You're using the measurements and everything, and also, do you eyeball it as well somewhat, if you have to?
There's some potential eyeballing that can happen. For example, there's no numerical description of where the lodged bullets were. We see them in an X-ray, and we can scale the X-ray to line it up, line the shoulders up with the photographs, and then basically place that bullet where we see it. And actually, the photographs in this case show those lodged bullet locations. So we do have anatomical landmarks in the photographs to place that. But yeah, so all the entry wounds, the initial bullet strikes are in red. Then there are 2 bullets, their description, in green, where are the bullets that lodged in the body, and then the blue are the exit wounds. So I talked about this a little bit ago, but then the next step is essentially to connect the dots. So to put a digital cylinder from essentially the exit wound, or where the bullet was lodged, to the entry wound. And then once we put it in the environment, we're going to extend that all the way back to where we can line up that bullet path through the body to where the bullet came from.
So you're first just getting how the bullets are going through the body in this scenario.
Exactly. So we've got a neutral pose here. So this pose has nothing to do with how Casey was positioned in the environment. But interestingly, one of the first things you can see going through this process, just like we discussed looking through the photographs, is that if you just look at a top view only, you can see there's a general pattern. It's a little confusing as we're looking at it here, but his right hand is on the left side of the screen, but they're going from his right to his left. And then if you look at the lower right-hand corner here, these 3 upper back bullet paths, they're roughly along the same path. Similarly, we have this bullet path that goes through his buttock, is again fairly level to the ground. But then we have these 2. We have that graze wound, and we have the wound that we saw in his lower back that lodges in his upper chest that have a very steep upward bullet path. So, and we'll see how that comes into play when we actually get to put this surrogate now into the environment.
In the environment, that's kind of reconstruction lingo or whatever. The environment means putting it into the house and positioning at the time of the shoot.
Yes, yes. So, okay, so this is a top-down view. On the left side, it's a little messy looking. This comprises this is a top-down view, and we've got the laser scans in there, which makes it a little messy. But on the right-hand side, we've just got some modeled objects based off of the laser scans. And so just to isolate it out here, we've got the gate on the left, and again, that's modeled based off of the Faro laser scan data. We have the location of the fence, so this location of the fence is based on the laser scan data. We've got the geometry of the porch or the landing. We've got the inside of the kitchen here, and then preliminarily positioning the surrogate for Casey in the house.
So what's missing out of that? This storm door?
It's just a top-down view, so you can't really see it, but we'll see it I think we'll see.
This Faro scan is very accurate, isn't it?
Oh, yes. Yeah, the Faro laser scanning data has measurement accuracies of 3 millimeters at up to 30 feet. So if we have a 30-foot laser, we're going to get an accuracy up to 3 millimeters.
All right, what's the next thing?
Yeah, so next then is, and this is now just a different view, more in line with the position of the gun between the gate. Looking at a preliminary positioning of the surrogate for Casey in the kitchen floor. So we're not lining up anything yet here. One thing that was, it's important to note that while I will apply spheres to the body for entry wounds and exit wounds or lodged bullets, you also have to do the same thing for any bullet evidence that's in the scene. So we have these green spheres that are here, represent the holes that we saw in the mesh of the screen, as well as there is one up top here that's where we saw that nick in the top of the screen. So then one of the real key things upon just first producing this figure is that we know that he's in the kitchen when he's shot, because there are only 3 holes in the mesh screen, and there are 3 holes in his lower back. There are 3 holes in his upper back, but no mesh screen. If he was standing on the landing, or if he was standing lower, then all 6 of those shots that went into his body would have gone through that mesh screen. So just this initial placement of him tells us that we know he has to have been standing at the kitchen level when he was shot.
So you're saying if you took the surrogate, dropped him 8 or some inches down onto the porch, that then all those shots that you see would have had to go through that screen?
Absolutely, yes. True. So then the next step was basically to start going through and determining the position of his body at the time each bullet struck him. It's really important to know in shooting incident reconstruction, we can only determine how the particular body part that was struck by the bullet was positioned at the time it was struck. So, for example, this bullet path through his upper back can't tell us whether or not his left arm was over here doing something else. We can't tell if his left foot was more forward or more backward. All we can say is that relative position of his upper body with respect to where the bullet came from. So I'm going to take away the laser scan data, and we're just going to look through all 6 shots, the reconstructed position and orientation of his body with respect to a position of the gun outside of the gate.
And once again, the 6 shots you're going through, it's not, this was shot number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're just going through them as they're labeled, just so we can talk about each shot.
Correct. Yeah, thank you for clarifying. So shot number 1 that we're showing here, not necessarily the first shot, we can see that in order to produce the bullet path through his body, he's fairly upright. So he's standing tall. Shot 2, this is that one that goes through his left side. Again, not an extreme bending forward or backwards, still fairly upright, not too far different from that first shot we were looking at. Oops. And this third upper back shot, again, there's not an extreme change in posture here that's happening between those 3 shots.
That shot, if we go back 1, I'm sorry. You see where the lower green shot, you're not saying it went through that portion of the screen, right? Back up.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, you see, that's going above the screen.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so then when we get to these lower shots, now we've got to consider not only the position of the gun and the position of his body, but also that the bullet had to have passed through something on the way there. And so we have this evidence in the mesh screen, and the lower hole in the mesh screen corresponds very well to that buttock shot that we saw. And that shot, again, has a bullet that lodges in his pelvis. So it doesn't have any extreme up or down angles. And again, so his pelvis at the time he received that shot was fairly upright, so in a standing type of position.
And you've taken away the whole side of the house and stuff, is that right?
Yes.
So if you were looking at this angle, you wouldn't be able to see his hand there or anything, because that's the house.
Correct.
I'll ask. But can you explain that, just so there's no confusion?
Yes, so we're primarily looking at how the body would have been oriented at the time it was shot. This is not meant to represent what someone standing in this position would have seen. So there is a house here to the right. Really anything to the right of the screen door who wouldn't have been able to see from this shooter perspective. So now we're looking at that graze wound. And that graze wound's farther to his left. We have a mesh screen damage that's further to the left. And in order to achieve that angle that we see, he's got to be bent forward. And similarly, we had that more extreme upward trajectory of the bullet that entered his right lower back and that ends up lodged in his upper chest. So in order to produce that, he's got to be in this configuration. So, oops. So we've got two here where he's got to be fairly bent forward. And the rest, he can be fairly upright when it happens. So we know this is a dynamic event. So he has had some movement over the time that all of these shots were fired. Similarly, just based on the spread of the shots from the top of his body to the bottom of his body and the left to right movement, we know that the gun has some movement over the period that those 6 shots were fired. So this is same sequence, just another view to try to help understand this. And here again, we can see the house. I'm going to take away the house so that we can have a better idea of these positions. But we're going to first look at the upper 3 shots. And again, you can see better here that there's not a substantial angle that his upper body has to be in order to line up with the position of the gun. Similarly with this lower body shot that goes through the buttock and lodges in his pelvis. But then in order to achieve the angle that we see for the graze wound and the angle that we see for the lower back to upper chest wound, he's got to be substantially more forward. So, and then after doing all of this reconstruction work, it's important to look back and see, you know, what's the range of motion of this gun? Does the range of motion that's modeled in this reconstruction match reality? Is it feasible? Does it make sense, basically?
Up to this point in time, we see the gun in there. What distance outside the gate there did you have?
Yeah, the gun is positioned 11 feet away from Casey's body.
And how did you come to the determination?
So that determination was made based on the position of the bullet casings and also based on Mr. Meade had stated that he was somewhere between 10 to 15 feet away from Casey at the time of the shooting, but it also just lined up. So the initial placement of the gun between with view of the gate that didn't have any other obstructions in front of it, because there are some supports for an awning that go over that porch that could get in the way. So that distance is based on that. Now, if we just look at this diagram here, it's certainly possible that this gun could be placed another 2, 3, 4 feet backward, as long as it's along this same bullet path. That's what we're looking at. So it doesn't have to be exactly right in this position. So we're looking at relative angles. So the relative position of the gun angle compared to the relative position of Casey, as long as it goes through the screen and fits the scene evidence. So that movement, so there was only three inches of movement of this gun through the reconstruction. And then when I looked at the range of motion of the pitch of the gun, it was around 6 degrees.
What do you mean by pitch?
Yeah, so basically tilting up and down. It's like a pitch on an airplane is when it's nose down or nose up. And that also actually agrees very well with the wound evidence. We have a wound on the upper back that's 17 inches from the top of the head. We have a wound that's, the lowest wound is 33¼ inches from the top of the head. And if you look at that total distance and back away 11 feet and trace an arc, that's about 7 degrees. So it's just another way to confirm this reconstruction and the motion actually matches the physical evidence. So, and then did the same thing just looking at a top-down view. So what was the range of the yaw? So if you're looking on a top-down, kind of hands on a clock, how many degrees was that range of motion? And it was a little over 3 degrees.
So what, after doing all that, what did you do with this data that you put together, was able to position Casey, position the trajectories? What did you do?
Yeah, so now that I've determined essentially how he was positioned and where he was positioned when he was shot, the next thing is to essentially investigate, ask this question of whether or not the posture described by Mr. Meade in his statements and during his testimony can be achieved in the context of the reconstruction that it was based on the objective evidence. So to do that, basically use the same model, the same marked body trajectory, but in this instance, I place the surrogate for Casey in the doorway. So if we recall from Mr. Meade's statement, said that he was in the threshold. So the threshold is that first step inside the kitchen. So right in the door, right where the door closes onto, it's above the threshold. So if I take this surrogate for Casey and place him on the threshold, and model that motion of turning and raising the arm back to try to point it in Mr. Meade's direction, the first test here, and it's quite clear when you can do it with this 3D technology and just look with our eyes, you can see that it's not possible to have that posture that he described and have the gun actually pointed back in his direction while having a position where you're standing in the threshold. So the figure on the right, we're actually looking at it from a viewpoint from the center of the backyard. So in this configuration, that hand would be pointed at us in the middle of the backyard, which is about 90 degrees off from where the gun was positioned when the shots were fired.
You're referring to the Bin Mazur photo on the left?
Yes.
Okay, I thought you maybe said right.
No.
So the left photo is where, according to where the hand would be reaching, all the lines were leading out into the yard.
Yes.
Which would be the trajectories that you use the same 3D modeling that we just went through, so it doesn't match up.
Correct.
What about on the right then?
Yeah, so on the right side, we're looking again more from a viewpoint of between the gates. So the general location of where the gun was or where Mr. Meade would have been standing. And this is approximately what it would look like. If one could get their arm around the door while standing in the threshold, this is the most that could be achieved.
But if you reached around the door and the door changes, is that
No, because your shoulder has to be beyond the edge of that screen door in order to actually reach around it, first of all. So there's a point where you just can't keep your center of mass over your feet while standing in the threshold. Otherwise, if you just move your hand back, it's going to be against the screen door and basically pushing the screen door open. But that door is always going to be in the way unless you can clear it and get to the outside of it.
Now, you've been to the scene.
Yes.
Can you describe it for us? Is it a tight area, or can you give us a little description?
Yeah, it's as we see here, we have a gate you can open leading up to the porch and the patio. This gate is not directly behind the door. It's to the left of the door if we're walking in. If I were to, which I did, try to walk in the house, open the storm door that was there, stand in the threshold and physically do it. Let's say I didn't trust this 3D stuff and I actually stood in the threshold, I could not achieve a position that was consistent with that description.
So what's the next?
Yeah, so this is just a little messy view here, but just focusing on the top here, this is sort of a top-down view from inside the house, showing you what is shown here, but with the 3D scanning data in here. And again, you can see that right arm is pointed towards the middle of the backyard, whereas the position of the gun would be almost directly up at the top of the screen or even a little further to the right. So it's just not possible in this position to aim and level a gun in the direction where Mr. Meade was standing while standing in the threshold. The bottom view here shows you that a little bit better because we see the position of the approximate position of the gun in the open gate, and then we see that position of the surrogate's arm again pointing to the backyard.
Okay, doctor, what were you able to examining all this? What did you come up with?
Yeah, so well, essentially, the next thing to do scientifically is just always is test it, continue testing it. So if this was Mr. Meade's recollection, what posture, what conditions allow that statement to be consistent with the objective evidence somehow? So I took the same figure and put him on the porch or the landing. And if he can be on the porch, on the landing, and moved over to the right such that the arm can actually get around that screen door, there is a configuration then where that pose is possible and could happen. It's just not consistent with the shooting reconstruction evidence because well, first of all, if as was stated, the shots were fired shortly after this pose, and there was a slight rotation, then all of the holes, as we talked about earlier, all the bullets would have gone through the mesh in the screen, whereas we know he was actually in the kitchen when all of those shots were fired. So that's one part of this. The second part of it, it would take time to get from this position to then take 1-2 steps up into the kitchen and then start moving to where the position of rest was for this to work at all. So, so we know he's not shot when he's standing on the landing. We know he is shot when he's standing in the kitchen. He can achieve this position when he's standing on the landing, but it's quite a substantial maneuver to first have to step up multiple steps in order to get into the kitchen for this to happen.
So based on that, did you come up with anything else? Conclusion?
Yeah, essentially just that the recollection through the statements and the testimony is inconsistent with the objective evidence and how we know that Casey was positioned when he was shot.
And the last is what you're doing is you're testing, trying to find if they're not only where the analysis places them, but then you're testing that statement, trying to find a position that fits. Is that right?
Correct.
And what I think you explained to the jury, you couldn't find a position that fits his description and that would fit the physical evidence and the trajectories in this case.
Correct.
There's one thing I should have mentioned at the beginning. You made 2 reports on this, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, and so you made a first report and then you had an addendum.
Yes. Yeah, the addendum was essentially to answer some questions that weren't, well, I guess was to produce there was my initial analysis, which contained these conclusions and opinions, but I hadn't produced in that report these figures that showed that I in fact did test Mr. Meade's statements. I had talked about testing them and the conclusions in my original report, but I hadn't included a description of or shown what I did to answer that question.
So when you did your full analysis and stuff, you did that, and you did everything, you just didn't have the, produce these photos.
Correct.
So based to a reasonable degree of scientific, or degree of science and biomechanical certainty, what was your conclusion?
Yeah, just again, that all the 6 shots that were fired by Mr. Meade struck Casey's body. That Casey was standing in the house at the level of the kitchen floor when he was struck by each of the 6 bullets fired by Mr. Meade. And that there's no configuration in which Casey can both be standing in the house and aiming a gun at Mr. Meade in the manner that was described and demonstrated by Mr. Meade that conforms with the physical evidence at the scene or in Casey's body.
And to where you had it lined up as him being in the house from what you previously have shown.
Correct.
So now, during the process and everything, you did receive Dr. DeMoulin report, is that right?
Yes.
And so, as well as taking his report, did you look at that?
Yes, I did.
And did you, what did you do with his report, looking at his analysis and conclusions?
Yeah, I just reviewed it like anyone would in our field, where a lot of us have an academic background and we value peer review, critically evaluating other people's work. I expect the same of my own, to understand what he did and the opinions he arrived at and how he arrived at those opinions.
Okay. Did you determine where you agreed and where you disagreed?
Yes.
If you go ahead and tell us about this.
Yeah, so Dr. Desmoulin, his first opinion was that it was likely that Mr. Goodson's body was inside the house near the threshold of the entrance and that his lower body was oriented as demonstrated by Deputy Meade during a prior hearing. And so I agree that it is likely that Mr. Goodson's body was inside the house near the threshold of the entrance at the time he was shot. So that we absolutely agree on. But where we disagree is that discussion about the orientation of his lower body demonstrated by Deputy Meade during a prior hearing, or having that orientation working essentially from a position standing inside the house.
Okay. So what did you look at?
Yeah, so primarily I looked at the figures that were produced by Dr. Desmoulin as part of his bases. And I just noticed some discrepancies in really the representation of physics here. The first one is this top-down diagram here. And I, to be fair, I don't know exactly what he stated this slide is about, but all I can see is that he's trying to achieve a position that demonstrates what Mr. Meade demonstrated. But what I can see here is that we have a left foot in the kitchen floor. We have a majority of the body over beyond the threshold, over the porch and the landing, which is just not a physically achievable posture. So,
in a hypothetical situation here, if he's claiming the left foot's inside the house, okay, and he's got the right foot, if it was down on the porch, would that ever work?
it could be, yeah.
Down on the porch and the left foot up into the threshold.
You could stand that way, yes.
But would it fit the physical evidence?
No, and again, what we see here is this is a top-down view, and just imagine or remember that the position of the gun is down and to the left here. So it's somewhere this way, and so this position right here is not consistent with what Mr. Meade demonstrated. So again, we've got a position where the hand is actually pointed towards the middle of the backyard.
Now, if the other foot's, you've got one foot up into the house, and you've got the other foot hanging in space there, okay? Can you explain to that a little bit further as to how that would anatomically, or is that?
Yeah, it's just not a position that could be held. So this, if anything, this would be a snapshot. I mean, we don't have a step around here. I don't think.
Better for the jury box.
Yeah.
Yeah, but everybody can't see it there.
Yeah, true.
You got a stool anywhere, Your Honor?
I don't have anything.
I'll describe it. I'll try to describe it here. The only way that something like this is achievable momentarily is if you are actually in the kitchen and take a step to the right as if you're going to step down. That's the only time when you can have your shoulders level. You're not going to be able to see my feet, but shoulders level.
Come on around here. That's fine. You can come out here.
So if I had a step right here and nothing down here, in order for me to be on this step, my center of mass has to be lined up over this foot. If my center of mass isn't lined up over this foot, then it falls to the right. So, so just by looking at this here, we know the center of the body is between both feet. If it was only over that left foot and he could stand in the kitchen and do that pose, center of mass has to be over this foot. So real straightforward physics. If, let's say, I'm standing on the porch and I want to step up into the kitchen, so I've got my weight here, I would step onto the kitchen and then have to do this in order to achieve this position. So, which takes us away from this posture. And again, it's just not consistent with what Mr. Meade testified to.
What else did you look at with, was there any other things that would point out over his view of Casey there?
Yeah, it's along the same theme here, where I'm unclear on this analysis, because in this representation, we have bullet paths entering the body, so presumably this would be the surrogate for Casey's position at the time he sustained these wounds. But he's very clearly outside of the kitchen and not on the threshold either. So almost his whole body, other than what we see from the top of his left shoulder, is over the threshold. So that's not at the level of the house. And we know it's 8.2 inches down at this location. And we know he's not standing on the landing when he's shot. So this, I guess without any further clarity.
He was standing on the porch.
Sorry, yes, he wasn't standing on the porch. So this figure shows him standing outside of the house. We can't see his feet, but he's either on the landing, and we know he couldn't be shot there because of the evidence in the mesh. So again, and again, this posture here wouldn't be consistent with him being able to orient himself to aim a gun back toward Mr. Meade.
And why is that? Why is that?
Again, his shoulder is actually inside the inside the outside. It's in from the edge of the screen, and in order to be able to reach around and then basically reach his arm and aim it in the same direction that we see these yellow lines. Yeah, sorry. Oops. He's got to have his shoulder out here in order to be even able to start getting his arm around the corner and then somehow aim it back in this direction. And that's not represented in this this graphic.
And you study the body, this is your forte. Is that anatomically feasible?
No.
Now, let's take this, okay? Suppose, even though it appears that he's got both feet on the porch, suppose there was testimony that, well, no, he's actually got that left foot up in the threshold. Would that make any difference?
No, because his left foot would be in the threshold, but his whole body would still be at the level of the porch and landing where we know he wasn't standing when he was shot.
Okay. And now we'll get to this later on. So what else did you look at? Is there anything else about that diagram that?
Well, there's just another diagram that is a little more cosmetically easy to look at, but demonstrates really the same concept. But we do get one zoomed out view here. But again, very clearly representing Casey outside of the house. So not inside the house, where I thought we agreed in that opinion that he was in the house when he was shot. But this diagram shows him clearly outside of the house when he's shot. And again, not in a position where even slightly moments before this could have been oriented to have his arm raised back toward the position of where we see that surrogate for Mr. Meade.
And to have the storm door in that position.
Right.
Okay, was there anything else?
Yeah, and just one more, again, along the same lines here, and this is somewhat of what I was demonstrating, is that we have, well, and actually, let me go back. So one of the things we see here is we have a representation of Officer Meade, or Mr. Meade, and then we have so we have one position for Mr. Meade, but then we have 3 bullets kind of coming out in a ray from the end of the gun. We know that bullets don't do that. I get what he's saying, that from this approximate position, these 3 bullet strikes occur, but.
So in other words, in his diagram, he's got the muzzle of the gun, and instead of just having one projectile coming out, he's got the muzzle, the still he's got is the muzzle of the gun, and then he's got like 3 things coming out of the muzzle of the gun. Not the bullets flying straight, but one's kind of going this way, one's going this way, if the gun's not moving.
Right.
Right. Going this way, or this way.
Right. So we're just not seeing any variability in his reconstruction for bullet-to-bullet orientations. Yes.
Also, he's got Officer Meade in a kneeling position out there. Now, the materials that you reviewed, did you see anything in his hearing testimony or anything in his statement that he was kneeling on one knee?
No, I don't recall that. So then back to this additional slide. So this is, again, we see the gun in one position, but we see 3 bullets radiating out. But the more, I guess, physics-defying feature of this is that my understanding is that this is a representation of the posture demonstrated by Mr. Meade during his testimony. But first, there's no arm raised up, there's no gun pointed back in the direction of the surrogate for Mr. Meade in this, because it couldn't happen that way in this posture.
Yeah, and again, you notice that going back to where you're saying, just physics doesn't provide for that. Even if it was, let's say it was a transitioning it to the house, okay? Not a still, just somebody standing here trying to balance to swing around, but it was an actual transition into the house. Would that work?
No.
And why is that?
No, so if this was any transition, this would be a transition out of the house. So we see that right foot just floating in space. If you step up you put all of your weight on that foot that you're stepping up to. So in order for him to have transitioned from the porch to this position, his whole body would have to be over that left foot while he's extending out with his right foot.
Is that what you demonstrated when you're stepping up? Your center of gravity is going to the foot that's, because you're putting weight on that foot.
Yes.
Okay. It'd be
Yeah.
like this.
Yes. Yeah, it's the reason if we trip and fall, our feet stop, but our body keeps moving and we're not able to get our feet underneath our center of mass to catch ourselves. In this instance here, we have this foot floating in space, and his upper body, if it's similar to what we've seen in these other figures, is not even over the threshold. It just could not physically achieve this unless it's a snapshot as he's transitioning from in the house to step outside of the house.
Now, there's one other thing, okay, well, it might be more than that, but he doesn't show any of the upper three shots in it, is correct?
Correct.
Okay. So based on your trajectories, I believe, which one of those wounds you said that were like steep upward wounds that you said it looks like they would match what yours is as if somebody's falling forward. Because if it's like this and you fall forward, you kind of level out. Does that demonstrate that there?
No. No, so two of these shots that we know were the lower, so the one on the left, furthest to the left, was the graze wound, and the one on the upper right there had the steep upward trajectory, are not represented in these diagrams.
Now, he doesn't show the path of the bullet after it went through the screen to the surgeon, right?
I believe he does, yes.
So can you explain, suppose there was testimony, that the bullet could hit the body and all of a sudden do a remarkable upward movement upward because there's been some deformity in the bullet.
Could this Councilman approach?
Yes, I believe so.
Suppose there was testimony that it looks like the bullet, the way as Ullman has it, going through the screen, and he's got the bullet still going straight, okay, when it entered the body. And then all of a sudden there's, to explain that upward trajectory, all of a sudden the bullet, as it hit the body and goes through, I don't know how many inches, somehow or another, it did this huge upward trajectory. Have you, in your experience in handling these types of cases and your educational background and everything, have you heard of anything like that?
Not a sharp deflection the moment it hits the body. Certainly we get bullets that will deflect after it's usually through, we'll do tissue simulants, like gelatin. You'll see after about 10 centimeters, you might see some deflection upward, sideways once it gets through 10 centimeters. And there might be some deflection from the screen itself. So you could have the bullet from the gun hit the screen, slightly deflect, but once it hits the body, it's still gonna produce a generally straight line unless it hits an object, then it will deflect. But those deflection angles are not what we would see in that bullet strike where we had the lower right back all the way up to the chest. So we don't see deflection angles like that. I've never seen it.
If I could just have one moment, Your Honor.
You may.
So, Dr. Bauer, I'm going to hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibits. Pardon me? Oh, they're just photos from out of this report. Just that would be, Doctor, I'm going to hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 40A, okay, and then all the way through 40FF. You could take a look at the packet of these photos and see if you recognize them.
Yes, I do.
And what are they?
Yeah, these appear to be comprised of the figures that I've generated in this case from my report and my slides.
And are they the figures that we've just seen through your presentation to the jury in this map?
Yes,
They don't include Dr. Desmoulins, is that right?
true,
But they're the ones that were in your initial presentation.
correct.
And are they fair and accurate copies of the photos and the evidence that you'd received that you used to rely on in this case?
Yes,
No. I would, again, if we just go through, just make sure we get, again,
That's all our approach. I mean,
or 1 minute.
you got one question.
Well, there were maybe 2.
Well, then we'll take a break and you can ask the 2 questions.
Doctor, your opinion is to a reasonable degree of scientific and biomedical certainty, is that right?
scientific and biomechanical certainty.
I'm sorry. It's not to possibilities or likely.
True,
It's a higher standard.
yes.
Well, we can deal with it. Are you done?
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our 15-minute break. Do not discuss this case among yourselves. Do not permit anyone to discuss it with you or in your presence. It is your duty not to report or express an opinion on the case until it is finally submitted to you. 15 minutes.
All rise.
Doctor, you step down. if you want.
realize there was a court reporter like Ms. Coots taking down every word,
Yes.
every question I asked,
Yes.
every answer you gave, right?
Yes.
And isn't it true that I ask you the following question? It says, would you agree that if a projectile passes through an intervening object, Dr. Bauer, before it enters the body, that the wound path would be less predictable? And you answered yes.
Yeah, and I guess I'm clarifying.
You're clarifying.
Yes, because since we know the path, what's unpredictable is the intermediate object to the person, because we don't know how that object could potentially deflect the bullet or the shard.
Let me ask you a question.
But if we know the angle that it hits the body, that is a predictable wound path. So I guess I'm trying to mince words there and be a little bit more specific.
Well, I don't want to mince words, but was my question unclear when I asked it back in December of 2025?
No, I think maybe I didn't consider it carefully enough. Now that I've
Consider it carefully enough. Is this a serious matter for you, Dr. Bauer?
absolutely, but when you're talking about theoretical versus what we know about a wound path, I just wanted to clarify the answer to that question now.
Did I rush you in answering the question, Dr. Bauer?
No, I don't
Did you
believe so.
ask me to clarify my question, Dr. Bauer?
No, I didn't need clarity at the time, but I've had time to think about it.
And so your answer under oath now is different than your answer under oath back in December of 2025. Is that what you're telling us?
I'm telling you the unpredictable path of the bullet comes from the intermediate object to the body. But if we know the angle then of that bullet as it's come out of the intermediate object, the path through the body is predictable.
But wound paths are important in your work, in this case, aren't they? Determining the wound path.
True, and that's not in question because we have objective evidence of the wound paths from the autopsy report.
And so we have at least 4 bullets passing through an intervening object. And if I look at your statement back in December of 2025, that would make all 4 of those wound paths less predictable. Isn't that right?
Okay, so
True? Yes or no?
it's not a yes or no answer. It's, if there was no intervening object and we had a position of a gun and a position of a body, we can absolutely predict what that wound path is going to be. If we have a gun, an intervening object, and a body, the eventual wound path will be unpredictable if it passes through that intermediate object, theoretically, hypothetically. But in this case, we know the wound paths. So we have objective evidence of how the bullet or bullet fragments passed through the body in which to be able to position the body at the time it was struck by a bullet or fragment.
Okay. So now we're all clear. Now you understand the question, and now you have a different answer, right?
I don't believe so.
So let's talk about the second question that you were asked to answer in this case. And that second question, framed in your report dated August 13, 2025, was that to determine whether Mr. Goodson's position and orientation when he was shot was consistent with Deputy Meade's description of his movements immediately before he was shot. Isn't that how you framed that?
Yes.
And do you have your report, or would you like to see it? to
I could,
make sure
I
representing that properly?
believe you are, yes.
Okay. And so let's go to slide 8. And slide 8 is, you put that together for us today, right? You relied on that today, correct?
Correct.
And let's look at how the second question changed from August 13, 2025 to present. You're asked to determine whether Casey's position and orientation, when shot, reconstructed from the objective evidence, is consistent with Mr. Meade's description of Casey's posture and movements immediately before shot, right?
Yes,
That's how you framed the second question, right?
true.
That's not how the second question was framed in August of 2025, right?
I would need to see how I framed it.
Would you like to see it?
Yes, please.
May I approach you on it?
You may.
I'm going to hand you what's not marked for identification purposes.
Thank you.
That appears to be your report dated August 13, 2025, right? It's page 13.
13.
Paragraph 13.
Yes.
So nowhere in this document, Dr. Bauer, were you asked to determine the posture of Casey Goodson. Isn't that right?
I added posture to this for clarity because position and orientation mean the same thing.
Okay. So you again did things for clarity, just for us, right?
Yes.
So no one asked you to determine the posture of Mr. Goodson? You did that on your own?
As part of that question, that was part of the task, yes.
Now let's go back to the 3D stills that are part of your slideshow and go to slide 32. All right, so again, that's a view from the person holding the gun, right?
Again, just to be,
The back.
it's a view from the back, yes.
And in that particular view, the surrogate, the person representing Casey Goodson, you would agree he has nothing in his hands, right?
True,
No gun, right?
true.
No Subway sandwiches, right?
Correct,
No keys, right?
correct.
And he's in a neutral position, right?
Not an anatomically neutral position. He's in a position consistent in this slide to produce that wound path.
Right. So in your August 13, 2025 report, you noted that you took courses while you were in school addressing factors that influence perception response time using both academic materials and practical demonstrations with simple and complex. Remember that?
I do.
And would you agree that an action is faster than a reaction, Dr. Bauer?
Would you clarify what you mean by an action and a reaction?
In other words, if I'm going to take an action, I'm going to be able to complete that action before you can react to it.
Well, I guess your action will happen before I react to it, yes.
And you agreed to that when we talked in December, did you?
Yes,
That an action's always faster than a reaction, right?
in order to react to something, an action has had to have happened to react to, so that is true.
Right. Matter of fact, I asked you the question, would you agree that an action is quicker than a reaction, Dr. Bauer? And you said yes, yes. You've read studies on that, haven't you? Certainly. Do you remember that?
Yes,
So there's no mincing words there, is there?
technically there is. It's if the action is to raise a hand and the reaction is to take 2 steps to the left, that reaction takes longer than the action. Or if the action was for someone to sprint at you and the reaction is to fire a gun if you had it up, that reaction, the actual time to do the reaction is faster than that complete action. So just being nitpicky, but always to react to something is going to happen after the action.
Thank you for clarifying that. Again, was my question somehow muddled in December of 2025?
No.
Did you not understand it?
I understood you.
And under oath, you said, yes, I've read studies about that, right?
Correct.
But now you've changed that, right? You've clarified that, right?
I have clarified that
All right.
and still agree with that.
Now, are you familiar with studies regarding the speed a human being can rotate their trunk?
Yes.
And would you agree that those studies support the data that a trunk rotation can occur in a fraction of a second?
Yes. You have to be specific about how much trunk rotation, but yes, certainly that can happen in a fraction of a second.
Would you agree that a young person could rotate their trunk quicker than an old dude like me? You agree with that?
It's possible.
Being kind. Now, are you familiar with Paul Taylor's 2021 article in the Police Quarterly on officer response times?
I know I have reviewed that paper. I haven't reviewed it recently to know the intimate details.
It was in Dr. DeMulin's report, right?
I believe so, yes.
You referenced it, right?
I believe so. I would have to look at his report again to verify.
And isn't it true that Paul Taylor reported that an officer response time to a perceived threat is between 0.32 and 0.86 seconds?
That sounds correct. I would always want to verify with the paper.
That wouldn't surprise you, though, right?
No.
Pretty quick, isn't it?
Relative to,
Snapping your fingers.
well, it's slower than snapping your fingers.
So would you agree that the instant an officer sees a threat and fires, isn't it true that the surrogate in your studies and slideshows that you put together, you have that person or that surrogate slightly rotated to the right?
Yes.
So in other words, that surrogate would be going this way, right? Slightly.
Yeah, with respect to me, yes.
And you've testified that this means that the right side of the surrogate's torso was turned slightly towards the position where Deputy Meade would have been, right?
Yes.
So you agree with that, right?
Yeah.
And so you concluded that Mr. Goodson's torso was likely rotated to the right towards Mr. Meade at the time of the shooting, correct?
Yes.
And did you determine the angle of the rotation?
I don't know the number, but certainly it's represented on the top-down view of the figures that I presented, but
I didn't ask you about a picture. I said, did you determine the number, the angle?
No.
Because you said that angles are very important in what you do, correct?
True.
You testified about that on direct examination, didn't you?
I did.
And so you don't know the angle that you rotated that torso towards Mr. Meade, right?
Correct. I don't have the number in my head, but it exists in that reconstruction.
Okay. And do you agree that bullet wounds and pathways through Mr. Goodson's abdomen don't provide you with enough information to tell what his right arm was doing when he was shot?
True.
That would be also true for the right hand, correct?
Correct.
So you can't give an opinion as to what Mr. Goodson's right hand or right arm even were doing when he was shot, correct?
Correct.
Because the bullet wounds and pathways don't afford you enough information to make that judgment, right?
True.
Let's talk about the position of the storm door, because that's kind of central in this case, isn't it? That storm door. It's in all of your clips or PDFs that you've created, right?
It's in a majority of them.
Images, rather. All right. And your images that you created, or the software created, show that door being open, right?
Yeah, slightly, yes.
All right. And did you ever reflect that it changed position?
No, not in the reconstruction, but certainly acknowledge that it can change position and likely did change position because this is a dynamic event. The 6 shots happen over a second. So at that time, the door would be moving slightly.
And so we know there was a hydraulic closer on the door, right?
Yes.
Did you ever determine the closing rate of that hydraulic closer?
No, I did see video with that, but I did not determine the rate.
So I guess we're stuck not knowing what the closing rate of that door was, right?
Correct.
And when we discussed this case in December of 25, I asked you to provide the angle of the door that you chose in your slides, right?
I don't recall.
Well, remember the exchange. At what angle did you place the storm door, Dr. Bauer, in your video? We were talking about a video at that time. And you said, again, I would have to open up the software and get that number for you again. That can also vary. Remember that?
I do now, yes.
And you put together this January 6, 2026 supplemental report. You've talked about that, correct?
Yes.
And again, I asked you to provide that data, right?
I don't know that you specifically asked me to provide that data, but I don't recall providing that data in my supplemental report.
Right. And even in your January 6th report, isn't it true that you wrote, to facilitate the court's and counsel's understanding of these technical matters, I committed to preparing a supplemental report that would explicitly address the questions raised during the hearing. This supplemental report fulfills that commitment and responds to the specific issues identified by defense counsel. You wrote that, didn't you?
Yes,
Put some thought into that before you wrote it, right?
certainly did.
And isn't it true that even though you said you'd provide the angle, you didn't provide the angle in your supplemental report, right?
True. Actually, I don't know that I said I would provide the angle.
Objection to that, Your Honor. I think it's a little misleading unless he wants to let the witness see.
Both of you overruled.
You finished, Mr. Schroeder?
All right, that's the question.
Now, the surrogate representing Mr. Goodson, in the slides you have, isn't it true you never having touching the storm door?
True.
And in Deputy Meade's statement that you partially incorporated into your report, isn't it true that he twice stated that the storm door was resting on Mr. Goodson's back when he shot, right?
Objection. I don't know if that's exactly what was said.
Overruled.
Would you like to see your report?
Yes, or I don't recall. I recall there being testimony or statement about the storm door being on Casey's back at some point. I don't recall that it was at the moment that Casey was shot.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yeah.
It's the August 13, 2025 report, paragraph 10, line 9, paragraph 11, line 2. Okay, paragraph 10, line 9, paragraph 11, line 2. Sorry.
Yeah, so again, the statement says, the suspect appeared to be trying to open the main door. I could not see the suspect's hands as his back was to me and the storm door was resting against his body. I repeatedly yelled for him to show me his hands, so this doesn't say that the storm door was resting against his back when he was shot. Paragraph 11 says, from the time I got out of my truck until the suspect opened the main door, I could not see his hands since the storm door was resting against his body and he was facing away from me with his back to me. Just before I fired, the suspect had opened the main door and taken a step forward. So again, that doesn't confirm that Mr. Meade claimed that the storm door was against Casey at the time the shots were fired.
But Mr. Meade does say that Mr. Goodson began to step forward when he shot, right? Just read that.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about the in the threshold issue, okay? You testified about that, and I think there's some disagreement by you and Dr. DeMullen as far as that possibility, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And Mr. Meade's statement places Mr. Goodson in the threshold. You would agree with that?
Yes,
And under oath, Mr. Meade also said that Mr. Goodson was in the threshold when he shot, correct?
correct.
Saw that in a prior proceeding. If I could go to paragraph 49, or page 49, slide 49. And you noted an inconsistency here, and that is that the objective evidence demonstrates that Casey was not on the concrete porch or landing when he was shot, right?
True,
And Mr. Meade never did put him on the concrete pad, right?
true,
Matter of fact, he always put him in the threshold when he shot, correct?
true.
And at our prior hearing, you defined this threshold as a strip placed on the floor in the door jamb, right?
Yes,
Kind of roughly how you oriented the jury today when you started talking about the threshold, right?
right.
And I believe that the Pharaoh scan taught you that the threshold and the kitchen floor are virtually at the same height, right?
Yes,
Maybe some variation, but not much, right?
correct.
And I asked you also at that hearing to provide the angle of the door that you've used in your animation and the slides, right?
I think, did you already ask me about this? You're talking about the angle of the storm door? And again, I don't recall you asking me to provide you with that number. You asked me what I used, but I don't remember having a number for you or providing that number.
Well, I don't think we were talking about the angle of the storm door back then. I'm specifically asking you about the angle of the storm door. And you remember I asked you, how far into the kitchen did you place this surrogate, Dr. Bauer? What distance? You responded, I would have to measure it far enough to where the angle between the gun and the nick and the storm door metal mesh frame approximately lines up within 5 degrees of the entry wound on the back of the surrogate, Mr. Goodson. Remember that?
Yes,
And I asked you, this is information that you can get to us, correct? You answered yes. Do you remember that?
yes, I believe so.
And that wasn't what we were talking about a moment ago, right? And so isn't it true, even though you said under oath, that you would provide the angle of the storm door that you used in your animation, your slides that you prepared, that you never disclosed that, right?
Again, I don't know that I stated that I would provide that number. I don't recall that specific language. I did produce my whole 3D file to be evaluated by Dr. Desmoulin as well, in which he could use to answer all of those questions and even questions that wouldn't have been thought of. So I'm confused. I thought we've already talked about this.
Well, we talked about the angle of the door. Now we're talking about the distance into the kitchen. I asked you specifically to provide that information, didn't I?
I don't recall you specifically asking me.
This is information that you can get to us, correct? And you said yes.
Okay.
Did you get that to me?
In the form of the figures that I produced, then yes, you can see that, but I didn't give you any specific numbers, and that's partially because, as I describe it in my report, there's variability here. I described it in my testimony earlier today about how the gun could be back 2 or 3 feet, and you still have these bullet paths that could be consistent with the evidence.
But despite me asking, and you preparing a supplemental report, you would agree that information that I requested is not in that supplemental report. Isn't that true?
I would agree there's no specific numbers in the report because they vary. But the figures that I produced that show the shot-by-shot detail show you.
I asked for a number though, didn't I?
I don't recall. I would.
So you concluded, to answer the second question, that the geometry just doesn't allow Mr. Goodson to be in the threshold with a storm door to explain Mr. Meade's recreation of how that gun was leveled at. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And I think if you would go back to slide 11, Ms. Stevens. You testified about this slide earlier, right?
Yes.
This is Sam Rippey's body-worn camera, correct?
Yes.
And you see Mr. Goodson lying on the floor, right?
Yes.
And did you determine the distance that Mr. Goodson's legs are from the doorway?
No.
Is that something that could be determined?
Yes.
It actually appears to be quite a distance, doesn't it?
I don't know what you mean by quite a distance.
Well, it's noticeable, right? It's like it's feet into the kitchen.
Correct, but I would always want to actually look at the measurements. And so someone's momentum, I do a lot of trip and slip and fall biomechanics of people falling, and someone could be standing at the door and tip over forward and slide a little bit forward as well. So quite a distance is not, I guess, descriptive enough for the science that I do.
But you could have determined that, right?
Yes,
You could have measured it, right?
true,
You chose not to, right?
true.
But you deemed this slide significant enough to show, ladies and gentlemen, the jury, right?
Yes,
And part of the purpose of you including this was to demonstrate that Mr. Goodson was not in the threshold when he was shot, right?
no, not necessarily. The purpose was to show where he ended up and that his momentum after being shot and moving into the kitchen led him to this point.
And Dr. Bauer, you were given a lot of materials to review in this case, right?
Yes,
And probably one of the largest dumps of information that you've probably ever received, right?
it was a lot of information.
And isn't it true that you included in your August 13, 2025, a list of all the information that you received, right?
Yes,
And I believe that you labeled that to be attachment E, right?
I
May I approach, Your Honor?
May.
I don't recall the label.
Provided it to us.
Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Same reaction. So this is all the information that you were given by the prosecutor's office to review in formulating your opinion, right?
Yes,
I think there's 67 pages of probably hundreds, if not thousands of documents, interviews, videos, everything in the world for you to review, right?
a lot of documents to review, yes.
And in the course of your review, did you review any information from anyone who was present inside the house when the shooting occurred?
I don't believe so. Not that I recall at this moment. If I received it, I certainly would have reviewed it, but I don't recall the specifics.
You would agree that someone's observations, if they were present inside the house when the shooting occurred, would be an important fact, wouldn't it?
Overruled.
But certainly I would review it and consider it in the context of the objective evidence.
And you would want to test that against maybe your conclusions, right?
Yes.
And did you know that a person by the name of Sharon Payne was inside that house when the shooting occurred?
I believe I did know that someone was in the house at the time of the shooting occurred.
About Sharon Payne, do you know that name?
I don't recall offhand.
You ever recall reviewing any information about Sharon Payne and what her observations were inside that house?
Not as I sit here. I don't recall the specifics.
Do you know, or do you know, that within minutes of the shooting, that she ran from her bedroom and peered into the kitchen?
I do recall that.
You recall that?
I recall something along the lines of this witnessing the aftermath, but not someone that actually witnessed the events leading to the shooting.
And do you know that when she peered into the kitchen, she saw her grandson lying on the floor? Do you remember that?
I don't recall the specifics, no.
Do you know that she made a 911 call after making those observations?
I don't recall.
Did you listen to the 911 call?
I would have, but I don't recall the specifics.
Do you know that she told the 911 operator that her grandson was lying in the door? Do you know that?
No.
Do you know that that observation was made within minutes of the shooting? Do you know that?
No.
Do you know that Miss Payne couldn't even see her grandson's feet as he was lying on the floor? Do you know that?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Said, did you know that Miss Payne couldn't even see her grandson's feet as he was lying on the floor?
No, I don't recall that.
And again, this is an observation from a fact witness right then and there, and you didn't review this?
That observation doesn't influence the objective shooting analysis or the bullet paths or the objective evidence that's provided.
That's not my question. You didn't review it, right?
No, I disagree with that. I don't recall specifically reviewing it, but I reviewed all the materials that I was provided.
Let's play the 911 call.
Councilman approach.
I'm going to play you part of the 911 call that's relative to my examination on this topic, right? If you would, Ms. Stevens.
At my house. He lives there with me.
So who shot him?
I don't know. I just
Okay.
heard the gunshots and I would get up and he's laying in the door.
Okay.
Did you hear that?
I heard it.
In the door?
I would love to hear it again.
It's not very long.
At my house. He lives there with
Okay.
me.
So who shot him?
I don't know. I just
Okay.
heard the gunshots and I would get up and he's laying in the door.
Okay.
Did you hear that?
Yeah,
He's laying in the door. That's what she said, right?
I do hear that, yes.
And would you agree that Miss Payne did not need to create a surrogate to explain her observation? Isn't that true?
True, but we also don't know exactly what she means by laying in the door either.
Isn't it true that she didn't have to create a 3D animation to explain her observations, right?
Overruled.
Well, we don't have an explanation for her observations. We don't know what laying in the door means
right.
from her perspective.
And you realize that Miss Payne wasn't paid a dime to make that observation, right?
Overruled.
I would assume that's true.
How much have you been paid to make your observations and conclusions, Dr. Bauer?
I believe I've been paid a little over $16,000 to date.
$16,000?
Yes,
How much are you owed?
a little over 7.
$7,000. Thank you, sir.
Any cross-examination? All right, redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Bauer, provided your entire 3D file, everything in it, the that has all these questions that Mr. Norder wanted to know. And at the time that Mr. Desmolin was their expert, is that right?
Yes.
So you not only gave them, didn't you, all the information, it's at their fingertip, you gave them even more information of the entire file.
Yes.
So all this stuff, Mr. Norder's like saying, well, did you give it to me, give it to me? You did, didn't you?
Yes, I believe so.
As it relates to his supplemental report.
Overruled.
Did anything you hear in here today, I think you answered a lot of things, is, yeah, I knew that, I knew that. Was there anything in here that changes your opinion today?
No.
Is there anything in here that substantially changes your modeling, your findings in this matter?
No.
And once again, can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what your conclusions are?
Yes, that all 6 shots that were fired by Mr. Meade struck Casey, that Casey was in the kitchen at the time he was struck by all 6 shots, and that the posture and position, the position and orientation of Casey as demonstrated by Mr. Meade is inconsistent with the objective evidence.
Do you still stand by that?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, you can step down.
Your Honor, can I ask just one question? And it is just one. Well,
Council on approach. Break for the weekend. Hopefully there's no rain this weekend. I can't cut my grass anyway. Do not discuss this case among yourselves. Do not permit anyone to discuss it with you or in your presence. It is your duty not to form or express an opinion in the case until it is finally submitted to you. And if you can be back Monday morning at 8:45, we'll try to get started by 9.
All rise.
Sue, you're gonna need the rest this weekend. Everybody can have a seat. What's our schedule on Monday?
I think we'll have, at this point at least, we'll have one more witness.
Okay.
Gunnar, if there's an issue with that, can we approach?
Yeah.